Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. We have for you another OG black belt, someone that's been around for a really long time, and he is also as equally known for his jiu-jitsu, I would say, as he's known for his yoga. His name is Dustin Brown. He's a second degree black belt at Sia Palista, and he is the studio owner of Warrior One Yoga. Thanks for joining us, Dustin.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. So yoga, right? With chicken and the egg here. Like, were you doing jiu-jitsu and you're like, man, I need to chill out here. I'm gonna take up some yoga. Or was it the other way around? You're like, super chill.
I was doing jiu-jitsu, and my wife went to this like 30-day challenge, and she was telling me how amazing she was feeling and that I need to go. But I was just, nah, why would I do that? It seemed kind of like not on brand. So basically, long story short, she convinced me to go and I fell in love. So it was definitely what kept me going was after the very first session was I had opened up my grips from training. My hands were just all, forearms locked up, and it opened up my spine and hips in a way that like hadn't felt. And at the time I was doing strength and conditioning. So it's taken me very much in the opposite direction of yoga. And opened my eyes and I was like, there's something to this. If I'm struggling this much in a 1 hour yoga class by myself, like there's something to this. So yeah, I got hooked in. But it was definitely jiu-jitsu came first.
Cool.
So how long ago was that the yoga came along?
I think it was about 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, like I've been training for a couple years. I have my blue belt, and starting to compete more and more. We had just returned from a trip to Brazil where I was over there doing like training every day, did a couple comps over there in Rio. It was pretty amazing. And that's when we came back, my wife did a little yoga challenge, and then boom, got hooked.
Amazing.
Fantastic. And so where along the line did it seems like it almost not took over, but it very much is your passion, would you say? Or are they equal? Would you say jiu-jitsu and yoga
I would say
equally?
they're equal. They're equal, but I have been focusing on yoga primarily ever since we opened the studios. And there was a time where I was coaching jiu-jitsu full time. And during that I opened up the yoga studios, and I was working on the West Side. I was working for West Side MMA. I had amazing bosses and they were really understanding. So as I opened up my yoga studio, it felt like I was kind of splitting my intention half and half, like between coaching and then teaching. And they're both very involved kind of things in themselves. Like teaching yoga is very much an art, and it takes a lot of kind of focus and awareness. And then if you want to be a good jiu-jitsu teacher and a really great coach, it's the same thing. You really have to be like on it, be there, be present, be with your students, know people, create really solid connections and relationships. And I felt that splitting my attention between those two worlds was unfair to both of them. It was like I wasn't giving my best as a coach and I wasn't giving my best as a teacher, and that wasn't sitting well with me. And so there came a time to make a decision, and I chose to go with the business that I created with my wife. And as it went that direction, as soon as I put all of my focus into the studios, like it just took off and skyrocketed and became its own thing.
That's really cool, man. And so
it's just sorry, Anton, I don't know if you were doing it. I was just having a look. So you've got 3 studios, one in Brighton, one in Mordialloc, and one in Mornington. Is that right? Sorry, what were you going to say, Anton?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, building, like it seems a lot of people struggle to have one successful outlet for jiu-jitsu or yoga. Like, you know what I mean? It's like some places are really successful. Other places, it seems like people struggle. You don't have your own gym, but you have built obviously now 3, to have 3 locations, you must be doing something right. So what do you think was the secret to the success in, as you said, you channeled your focus, but did you channel your focus into the marketing as well, or like did you pick
Well, like I channel my focus into teaching and doing my thing, and because I opened it with my now ex-wife, like we still run the businesses together. Instead of life partners, we're just business partners.
Sure.
And we have a really amazing dynamic. She runs the marketing and the business side and management, and I run the teaching side and the trainings and the retreats, and I look after the things like help out the teachers and give them feedback and things like this. And I do the things that I'm passionate about. So I think that's really key there, is to have people that love what they do. Nova, she loves business, marketing, like figuring out the why behind people's pain points and how to, it's basically customer service, you know, how to look after people well. And she does that incredibly well. And then I love to teach, and I love to watch essentially a form of self-development. Yoga is like self-improvement. You watch people just get better and better the more that they, you know, work on the principles of yoga, which is essentially the foundations of modern psychology. So kind of goes hand in hand.
Love it.
I love the name of your studio as well. Like, I guess yoga is seen by the masses, I suppose, as something kind of soft and gentle. And would you say that with your name, the Warrior One, that, I mean, I know that there's a warrior pose in yoga, so that there is still that, but how did you, like, is it tailored more towards that sort of thing, or is it just a coincidence that that's the name?
Warrior One is the name of a pose, but more than that, like when I first came up of the name with the name, the initial idea was to open a jiu-jitsu and yoga place in one, where it had like one reception, a gym, jiu-jitsu gym on one side and a yoga studio on the other. And that was the original idea. And I thought that Warrior One really worked for both. It works for both kind of modalities. And when we started to get ready to launch the business, all of our advisors that we had at the time were like, don't do two businesses in one. It's like two separate markets. It's two separate businesses. Don't split your focus, essentially. Focus on the one, do that well, and the world's not ready for your idea. And essentially. And so we took that advice. I'm still a little bit sad because I kind of want Warrior One Jiu-Jitsu, but you know, one day. That's where the name came from. It was just that I thought it would work for both. It's a pose, but it's also like, as a sport, yoga is an individual sport, but you're in a community together. And then same with jiu-jitsu. It's a kind of, you can't do it without other people, but it's a very much a personal endeavor and a personal kind of growth and adventure for yourself. You can kind of make your own way and find your own path. So each and every person is their own warrior.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to know like what you think, like having deep dived into both jiu-jitsu and yoga, and quite a few people have, but we rarely get to get the views of this. Like, what is the connectedness for you between jiu-jitsu and yoga? Where do they cross over? You just talked about them being an individual sport, right? Or an individual, but you're part of a community, but where else do they cross over?
I think what you learn on both mats, whether it's a yoga mat or a jiu-jitsu mat, kind of starts to directly relate to everything that's happening in your life off the mat. And so how you deal with problems and technical situations and things that are perplexing in your brain on the jiu-jitsu mat, like how do you deal with life's challenges because of that? It teaches you so much, and it teaches you to do things with a respectful and humble attitude, and kind of this outlook that, like, you know, if you just kind of take your time and keep pushing, you can get wherever you want to go. Like like when I started jiu-jitsu, I was the biggest noob, and I knew that, and I hated it. And I was like, I don't want to suck at this. This is something really cool, and I'm a kook, and I don't want to be a kook. And okay, let's figure this out as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and like download, because I want to get out of the kook zone. But I started to learn so much about myself it was so much more than jujitsu, you know, and the techniques that you learn on the mat. It teaches you so much about life and perseverance and showing up.
Yeah.
For sure. And so tell us about how you did start in jiu-jitsu. When you mentioned that you were already doing jiu-jitsu when you discovered yoga. So how did your discovery of jiu-jitsu come about?
Okay, I need to go back. Before jujitsu, I was a pro surfer, and I was traveling, but I was based out of Bondi. And the reason because of that, I grew up in Hawaii, and one of my best friends that I grew up with on Kauai, which is a pretty small island, he was going to University of Sydney, and was living in Bondi. And ever since he went there, he would send me messages and calling me up and be like, "You got to come here. Bondi is amazing. There's surf. There's millions of hot chicks. Like it's epic." So first thing I did when I got a contract is I flew to Bondi, and I posted up with him and started traveling, going to Indo and all kinds of other adventures. But Bondi was home base for that time. And after about 3 years, I met what would be my future wife, and she was based out of Melbourne, and she needed to finish school. So I moved to Melbourne, and in doing so, like Melbourne's cold, far from the beach, and the food is really good. So that kind of combination, I put on a bunch of weight in a short period of time. And one of my mates, he came from Kauai to come visit me and stay with me for a little bit. And one of the first things when I picked him up at the airport, he picked him up and he's like, "Holy shit, you're so fucking fat. Like, what happened to you, dude?" And I was like, "I'm not," you know, because it kind of like happened gradually. And I wasn't just like, it didn't like I have a giant double chin. It's just like I kind of got a little bit bigger everywhere. And I was like, "I'm not fat." He's like, "Bro, you're fat. We got to do something about this right away." And he was a blue belt at the time. He'd been training with Longman on Kauai, and he'd been doing jiu-jitsu for some time. He's like, "All right, I'm gonna find a club. We'll go train." And he took me to jiu-jitsu, and I remember my first ever class, I got absolutely demolished by like a little girl and a young boy, like choked me out and armbarred me, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
It was like really fun and playful, but I like after I was like very humbling. I was like, you know, these little kids like they're fucking me up, and like it's probably not the best for this. At the time, I was like over 100 kilos. I was, you know, I had some weight on me, and I was like, this is something I should probably learn. And so I started going with my friend. He was showing me stuff at home. I was going to training, and it kind of went on from there. I got fully obsessed, and the jiu-jitsu journey began.
Amazing.
Awesome.
All right, I've got a bit
I
of a
can't remember how many
Okay.
people have said that a smaller person messed them up on their first class. Yeah, it's got to be at least half to 3/4 of our guests, and that seems to be a big tipping point that gets people really addicted into it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I had watched UFC. I knew what arm bars and rear naked choke and these things were, and I was like, I'm not gonna let anyone do that to me. I'm strong. And yeah, literally like a 16-year-old boy, like a young boy, and a little girl, like she was like not even like below teenage. And like I wasn't trying to kill these little kids either. I was playing with them, but I like when they were doing this to me and I was tapping, I was like, that was real. Holy shit. Oh, like it was very awakening. It was like,
Yeah.
huh, technique does overcome strength.
Yes,
And
it
that
does.
kind of wow moment, like I had done some boxing and some Muay Thai, and like I just hated getting punched in the face. Like I really respect those arts and they're amazing, but like some people thrive off that, and I'm not one of them. I'm just like, oh, that's not that fun. And so jiu-jitsu really appealed to me in a larger way as well.
Yeah.
It was like,
For
okay,
sure.
this is really cool. From day one, I was sparring, and I died lots of times, but I got to go over and over and over. So there's something to this.
So
Yeah, for
true.
sure.
So I'm interested to ask a question that I don't know how I've never asked this on the podcast before, but it's something I ponder, right? And very like you've been open that you went through a divorce. And the thing is, all three of us have been through a divorce, right? In our jiu-jitsu career. And what my question for you is, well, before I ask the question, I'll kind of paint a bit more context. We get to where we get to in our art because we show up every day, because we work through the problems, because we basically do what it takes to overcome and just keep showing up. And I wonder, have you ever pondered why? Like, and as you also said, it's a big piece of personal development. You have to grow as a human being in order to just stay in it as well. You have to change your view of it over time as you get older, as you deal with injuries, losses. So yeah, my question is, do you ever ponder why we could let a marriage not work when we're so committed to things that we will bust ourselves to survive in? Did you ever ponder that?
Well, jujitsu also teaches you when to tap out,
Oh, I love that, man.
right? Like,
Shay.
right? Like, yeah, persevere, push on. But if it's not working and it's hurting you, tap
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
Hell
right?
yeah, man. That's the
So,
perfect answer, bro. Why didn't it occur to me?
And Dustin, I'm interested to learn a bit more about your pro surfing. So, I
mm,
mean, they've often talked a lot about jiu-jitsu, yoga, and surfing being like a triangle, And I don't know that we've had other yogis on before, but I don't know we've had anyone that's actually done all three. And I mean, if you were a pro surfer, you've really done all three really well. So, can you tell us a bit about your surfing?
I grew up on Kauai, which is the Garden Island, which has not been affected by the fires, and which is really unfortunate. Maui's suffering right now. I don't know if you've seen, but
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like on my Instagram, I have like little fundraiser thing. Literally, it's like if people that could throw $3 just put $3 and help this massive devastation. It's a place like I didn't live there, but it's a place I visited many times ever since I was a little kid. There's this giant banyan tree on the beach in Lahaina, and when they show the pictures of everything burnt out, it's one of the things that's still kind of standing, and yeah, heavy. So still alive, but like I remember climbing on that tree as a little kid, and like I have memories there. And to see it now just decimated by flames is pretty heavy.
That's sad, man.
So,
Yeah.
but
We'll put a link to the fundraiser when we post this
yeah,
podcast as well.
it's
Yeah.
like thank you. It's just like I'm gonna try and do like little fundraising event here in Melbourne just to see if we could help out
Yeah.
and do something about that. But somber moment. But I grew up on Kauai, which is a beautiful island, and I'm really fortunate to have grown up there. It's such a paradise. So I grew up surfing every day. My dad was a surfer, and he taught me to surf and pushed me to surf, and then let me go. But because my parents were Jehovah's Witness, very religious, I never competed as a kid, and so that kind of held me back as far as getting sponsors and like actually getting exposure into the surfing world. And so my dream ever since being a little kid was to be a pro surfer, but that was kind of like no idea how that was going to happen. I actually ended up moving out of my parents' house when I was really young and started working and getting jobs. And when I was around 19, just before I turned 20, I moved to LA. And I moved to from LA to Orange County. I was living near Newport Beach and ended up bartending and doing all this stuff. So when I moved to LA, the exposure I got there, because I was on a small island with like some of the world's best surfers at the time, like I grew up with Andy Irons and Bruce Irons, who was like multiple time world champion and things like this. Like I didn't stand out. But when I went surfing in California, compared to millions of people in the water there, it was like I was a clear standout. So it wasn't hard to, after some time, to pick up some sponsors. And the person that picked me up, it was just a fluke. I didn't have to compete. I didn't have to do anything. He picked me up as a sponsored free surfer, which means I was on contract for his company to do photo shoots and lookbooks and things like this. But other than that, for the rest of the year, I was just on salary doing whatever I wanted. And that meant I could travel, could be in Indonesia, I could be in Australia, I could be in Hawaii. I could just do my thing, and it was pretty special. So had that for about 4 years, but then I ended up meeting my ex-wife and moving to Australia, and that kind of shifted how that arrangement worked. We're still on good terms. It was amazing. I'm so grateful for that opportunity in that time. But then, yeah, I started focusing on jiu-jitsu. I had Australian surfing sponsors for a long time, but they did not pay the same kind of salary as the US ones. And I transitioned into my focus into jiu-jitsu, and then that really took off in its own way.
Wow, man.
But
I
I love
want to
surfing.
what
I've been
yeah,
surfing a lot lately.
you have.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you still surf now?
Yeah, I love it. It's something that's just ingrained. And I'm very grateful because yoga and jiu-jitsu keep you extremely mobile and strong. And so when I hop on my surfboard, it doesn't feel like I stopped or have left time off. And
Mm.
so I surf quite a bit around Melbourne now, but I was just in Bali. I was actually just in Phuket and I was surfing in Phuket. There was waves over there. It was my first time surfing in Thailand, which was cool.
Awesome,
And
man. So do you think that like growing up with I like it sounds like your parents, do you think your parents were holding you back or were they preparing you in other ways? Because it sounds like when you got to a situation, it was like pulling back some sort of rubber band and then, things really launched and possibly it's because they held you back in some ways and pushed you in. I don't know. But what's your view on all of that?
I have to think like just as much as like there's things I can complain about my childhood, I have to really be grateful for what my parents gave me. And like as much as there's qualities that I notice in my parents that I have in myself, like these things I dislike or that trigger me, all the good stuff comes from them as well. Like
Mhm.
my dedication, my loyalty, my perseverance, my drive, all these things, they come from my parents.
Yeah.
And so there's other things that they did that like I don't really agree with like their choice of religion, but they're lovely people and they had beautiful intentions and they were doing their best. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm interested your opinion that jiu-jitsu helps with your mobility. I don't know that I could say the same. Like I do yoga as well, but I know if I don't do yoga, if I'm only doing jiu-jitsu, I
so
don't feel mobile at all. I think it's sort
um
of the opposite. Sorry to say.
I try to really incorporate mobility movements in my warm-ups.
Uh-huh.
And then when I roll, I try and not be too rigid and try and be pretty fluid. And then after, I usually do a cool down where I stretch a bit. So if I didn't add those elements in, jujitsu does turn you into like
Yeah.
kind of like full monster with like
Yeah.
claw
Yes.
hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
But I think movement, yoga, and jujitsu, when I start to put these elements together, like when I get onto the jujitsu mat, it's a canvas to do all these movement moves that I have to usually do on concrete that I can then roll around and add cool kind of dimensions to. And I'm always playing. So I
Mm.
think I just kind of put everything together.
Mm.
That's a good point. Like for me, it's a trade-off, right? I've got limited time on the mats, and it's kind of trendy right now to not do a warm-up, to not do a cool down. Coach is like, we don't do those stupid warm-ups. I don't
I'm too
believe
old
in
for
them.
that.
Yeah, you never see a lion warm up before it takes down a gazelle, that sort of thing. So everyone's like that. But actually, I like your idea of making it that this gives me the opportunity to do some more flary kind of interesting stuff if I've got more mobility. And I think it's something which I'm going to need to put back in my game at some point because it really is gone. Any sort of warm up is gone. Any sort of cool down is gone. I'm there. I did jiu-jitsu. I go home. So I got a lot to learn in that way.
I'm getting older. I can't do it. I don't feel the same. And I think like because I practice so much yoga and I meditate, it really kind of gives you this kind of awareness of your body's energetic field. And like when things are off,
Hmm.
oh, it's not good.
No.
You don't like it. And I always have to kind of do something to look after it. So I'm always doing mobility. I'm always rolling on massage balls and like I went to America to get trained in a form of self myofascial release because I was so sore from jujitsu. I knew there had to be a better way to
Right.
like look after yourself. And so I have like ways, and I'm doing this for myself daily so that I don't break. Like I'm 42 and I feel like I'm in better shape than I've ever been in my life.
Mm.
And it's because like I've been slowly adding and adding to my kind of routine and my awareness and my knowledge of how my body works. And that's been allowed me to really kind of help other people in my studios. And that's a really satisfying feeling.
And Dustin, what would a typical day or a typical week look like for you in terms of your spread? Obviously, you're teaching a lot, whether it's jiu-jitsu or yoga. How about in your own training for yourself? How many times a week would you train both disciplines?
So on the yoga mat or meditation, like that's a daily practice. So I'm getting when I wake up, and then in the afternoon I have a meditation, and then depending on the day, if I'm teaching early in the morning, I'll teach first and then practice after, or I'll practice in the morning and then teach after. And for jiu-jitsu, usually nowadays it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm on the mats. And I usually go to the lunchtime class with Carlos in the city. That's full of like, usually a lot of black belts and killers come, and there's just an epic vibe. We play fun music. Carlos is always high energy, and it's good times.
Awesome. We'll have to get down there sometime and have a roll.
Yeah.
I've just finished reading a bunch of Dave Goggins books, and I don't know if you know who that guy is. He's like, do you know Dave Goggins, the Navy SEAL guy? And he talks about how now, I mean, his body's so broken from all of the things he's done, but he literally spends 6 hours a day stretching. He's in love with stretching. He just stretches all the time. Like he might be on the, hey, bro, in the background, Kim's. So yeah, he's like stretching 6 hours a day. It's like he'll get up at 4 a.m., stretch, stretch like while he's in meetings, or stretch constantly. And he just swears it has been 100% transformational in his world. And he just wishes he discovered it earlier. So, I understand. But
doesn't he run like ultra marathons and do just the most ridiculous, mind-blowing physical feats?
Yes,
I've seen some funny memes of him running on Mars with like Joe Rogan and whatnot. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's hilarious. That's all I could think of as you're talking about David Goggins.
Yeah, it's pretty funny though. But yeah, after all that, he's come around from this hard method of doing it. Like he wanted to be harder than woodpecker lips, but from that he's gone from no, I gotta stretch constantly.
Often,
yeah.
Like you feel your best when you're kind of like not too loose, because you're too loose, you're just floppy and you got no kind of alertness to you, and you don't want to be too switched on where you're just rigid and tight. You want to be down the middle. You want to be able to be fast or soft or hard if you need to be, and decide in the moment. And I think, think how Bruce Lee is always talking about being like water, and like there's so many other elements or ways to talk about the flow. But in yoga, they talk about this kind of sattvic way, or the middle path. And I think even in like, you start to look at the path of martial arts, it's kind of gotten away from tradition. But if you look back at tradition, all of the arts were balanced by other things. The samurais had to learn calligraphy or flower arrangement or origami, and these things that took finesse and softness. Because if you're just hard and rigid all the time, that same thing will start to really affect your character. And so as human beings, we have so many different layers. And if we're not aware of this, and we only focus on the physical, and we only kind of look at it in one dimension, that'll kind of come through in our life experience. But the more open you are to these experiences and open your mind and see what's there, it's pretty special.
I have to agree. Yeah. Amazing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What would you say to our listeners who sort of turn up their noses at stretching, or who maybe they're time poor and they say they don't bother about stretching, or they don't have the motivation? What would you recommend? What's optimum for jiu-jitsu practitioners in terms of stretching on a like daily or weekly basis? What would you recommend?
I would recommend that each and every individual find something that works for them, and like science and knowing range of motion and how that works and relates to training and this and that. Like, if you can externally rotate your shoulder quite a bit, when people go to Kimura, you can just straighten your arm and pull it back, and it's not a thing. But if taking your arm to here makes you cry, maybe you need to look at your shoulder mobility, and it's just going to help you live a better life. Like it's science, and then you don't know what you haven't experienced or felt. But then anyone that I've met that has opened their mind, because usually it's a closed mind. It's like, why would I need that? I'm da da da. It's like your brain is just as rigid as your shoulders, most likely, and your spine. And so, there's sayings that come from like ancient cultures, like I think it was Confucius that said you're only as old as your spine, you know? So you got to keep things moving. Have you ever heard of this concept of the fuzz?
No.
Okay, so after this, I want you to go and watch the Fuzz speech on YouTube. It's like a 5-minute video, the Fuzz speech by Gil Headley. He's like this weird little doctor dude.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Yeah, watch that. It'll just give you kind of a little more in-depth look of the interfaces of your muscles that are meant to slide and glide. And every night when we go to bed, they kind of fuzz over. And if you don't move, those layers begin to adhere together and build and build. So each and every night that compounds until one day, what once was meant to slide and glide becomes a fixed structure. That's why people get frozen shoulder and other things, because they're sore. They don't want to move it. It hurts. And then that range of motion, that pattern gets less and less and less because our body knows one thing: move it or lose it. If you're not using it, it's going to get really efficient at not moving that. Just like when you wear a cast, how skinny your arm gets. Same concept. So if we can start to incorporate more and more range of motion into our bodies, not only will this help us move beautifully for the entire life. You could be in your 80s and still be fluid and moving in your body, but I'm sure you've seen people walking around that are stuck and don't move anymore. Yeah,
Mom has frozen shoulder, man. I can relate. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm watching.
Right, and it's just pain, and it gets terrible. And to get that range of motion back is a lot of work. So I think the pattern needs to be a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and not to an extreme range, but that middle path where you're strong yet limber, you're mobile.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Amazing.
Yeah, everyone that tells me like they're like, oh, stretching's for girls. I'm like, you sure? You're telling me you don't want to touch your toes? Like, if you have a life skill and touching your toes isn't accessible, you don't want to do that. And they're like, oh, actually, it's like, come on, man. I know you want to be able to look at other things down there. Come on. Guys that are rigid like that in their mentality are so funny.
Yeah.
It's not hard to get them to change.
Yeah.
I think it's a defense mechanism. I really do. I think it's just a very superficial defense mechanism because they don't want to look stupid.
They know it's going to hurt and it's going to take a lot of work. That's why they don't want to do it. But when I started yoga, I was a little rock. I was literally a rock. Touching my toes was painful. I had no mobility in my thoracic spine. It was stuck forward. My shoulders were rounded forward. My forearms were completely locked. And it took a lot of yoga, but not just yoga. It took a lot of massage and body work and like doing other like weighted mobility work and learning how to do handstands and rings and all these other things that opened me up in ways that, you know, yoga was the catalyst to try and experiment with these other modalities. And now it's just become a part of my life.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
We only have 2 minutes left. So I think that it's time for you to like pick an area that you want to talk about and share about it, whatever you would like.
2 minutes.
Community. You've got 1 minute and 50.
1 minute 50 now. So just some words of wisdom to finish us off with.
If the culture is that, you know, less and less movement is happening at the start of a jiu-jitsu class, and people are anti-drilling, and you know, people don't want to do cool downs. I really I hate that culture. I don't like it at all. I think it's ignorant and unsafe. And I think if people are going to really look at optimizing their human potential and they want to be the best at jiu-jitsu they can be, they need to look at these other elements and layers. And if they don't, you'll keep going until you break. And then you won't keep going. And maybe you'll come back somewhat broken. And if that remains your mentality, it's going to happen again and again until you learn your lesson. You start doing this stuff. So it's like, I'm older, learn from my injuries and my mistakes. Why do you think I do all these things? It's because I was in pain. I was in so much pain, and now I'm not. And now I can do things, moves in my body I thought I would never do. Like the back bends I can do now and splits and handstands and all this stuff. It's so much fun. It's so much fun to be able to control and move in my body in this way. I never thought I could be able to do this because I was literally a rock. I was stuck. So experience your potential. Don't get stuck. Keep moving. If you're in pain, you can fix that. And that's it.
Strong and wise words,
Beautiful.
brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
I think
Thanks
we're
for
about to run
having
out of
me.
time. Thanks, Dustin. See you on the mats.
Peace.